On the morning of September 11, 2001, I was strapped into a National Guard plane that lifted off into an empty sky from the Albuquerque airport. The scene was the same around the nation. For the first time in history, the Federal Aviation Administration had cleared the skies over the United States of all airplanes. The FAA ordered all pilots in the U.S. airspace to land as soon as possible, regardless of their destination. The FAA ordered all incoming international flights to divert, and the Aviation Agency canceled all scheduled flights. Within hours after a 33-year-old Egyptian terrorist crashed a Boeing 767 into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, the FAA had stopped all air travel all over the United States. At 7 that morning, I was preparing to leave my hotel in Albuquerque when I heard the first report that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center.
There has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft. We don't know if it was a private aircraft. We have no idea how many were on board or what the extent of the injuries are right now.
Only a month earlier, on the nomination of President George W. Bush, I had taken the job as administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration. I had traveled to New Mexico for a public debate with Governor Gary Johnson on drug policy. The terrorists and their sponsors hoped to destroy the United States. Although they killed nearly 3,000 people, our enemies learned that they had mistaken America's kindness, generosity, and compassion for weakness. In the same way that many of our enemies before them have underestimated our strength, the attackers mistakenly believed that they could deliver a sharp blow and America would falter. The terrorists did indeed strike a grievous blow, but as the world knows, their mission failed, utterly and completely. The 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attack is an appropriate time for us to pause a moment longer than usual and to say the names of the 3 Arkansans who died in the attack. My staff and members of my security team understood quickly that we wouldn't be returning to Washington on a commercial flight. We went to the Albuquerque DEA office to watch the televised news and to communicate with headquarters. We made some quick decisions. We sent out word to all of the field divisions to take all necessary steps to provide security and for our agents to work their informants for any hint of a further attack. By the time we had secured a National Guard plane and pilot to take us to Washington, 29-year-old Arkansan Sarah Lowe was already among the victims. Sarah, a native of Batesville, was an attendant on Flight 11, the first plane to crash into the World Trade Center. Melissa White Higgins, born and raised in Bald Knob, Arkansas, worked in human resources for Marsh and McLennan on the 99th floor of the North Tower. She died after the plane struck. Moments before the crash, Carmen Taylor, an Arkansan from Fort Smith, was talking with a Japanese couple as they waited in Battery Park to board a ferry to Ellis Island. The woman pointed to the World Trade Center and announced with pride that they were in New York to visit a nephew who worked there. After Flight 11 flew into the North Tower, the tour guides herded the tourists onto the boat. Carmen pointed her new digital camera toward the World Trade Center and snapped pictures. At 9:03 a.m., Carmen captured images that became 2 of the best-known pictures from September 11 when the Associated Press made them available around the world. In one photograph, United Airlines Flight 175 is about to crash into the South Tower. The second photo captures what many believe showed the face of the devil leering from the smoke and flames. After we boarded the National Guard plane, we sat on the runway for more than an hour awaiting clearance from the Department of Defense and the FAA to depart. Finally, the pilot told me that Defense and the FAA had cleared us to leave, but the controllers in the tower hadn't received the official word. I looked at him and said, "We've got approval from the Department of Defense and the FAA?" He said, "That's right, sir." And I said, "Take off." So we took off, probably with someone in the control tower squawking a little. While we refueled in Little Rock, I called Susan, who was in Fort Smith, and checked with the 3 of my children who were living in the D.C. area. We evacuated the DEA offices in Washington, which were directly across the street from the Pentagon. Several DEA employees had seen American Airlines Flight 77 crash into the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m., nearly an hour after the first crash. Navy Operations Specialist 2nd Class Naaman Lyons, the 3rd Arkansan to die on 9/11, was killed in the assault on the Pentagon, where he had been working since January of 2001. He was born in Pine Bluff in March 1971. He was 30 when he died. Shortly before 10:03 a.m., in an action that reflected the sacrificial courage and strength that sets the United States apart from every other country, Americans aboard United Airlines Flight 93 saw what was happening. The passengers huddled and then attempted to overpower the terrorist who crashed the 4th hijacked plane into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
This is one of those cases where the pictures really do tell the story, that sort of the most horrifying aspect of this particular crash scene is how little debris is visible. There is a large crater in the ground. That's really all you see, is a large crater in the ground and just tiny, tiny bits of debris. There has been at least one report that the investigators out there have found nothing larger than a phone book.
As our plane entered Washington airspace that evening, a fighter jet accompanied us to a military facility. At the smoke-filled DEA headquarters, I gathered with my executive staff. I had been on the job for a little over a month, and my job was changing dramatically. The DEA was pivoting from the war on drugs to the war on terrorism. Our agents across the country were watching for any tip about another attack. One of our agents in Fort Worth, working the train station, picked up on a couple of passengers who had box cutters and hair dye. They had been grounded in St. Louis and boarded Amtrak. I went home about midnight. On Sunday after the attack, Attorney General John Ashcroft called a meeting of the Justice Department leadership in the command center on the 4th floor. Some of the leaders who were there have become well known, such as former Director of the FBI Robert Mueller and Solicitor General Ted Olson. The Attorney General of the United States comes in and he looks at us and says, "I've just been told by the President of the United States, don't let this happen again." He looked at us and said, "I've got to expect more from each of you. You've got to expect more from all of your people. You've got to work longer hours. You've got to work harder. We've got to do everything we can to make sure there is not another attack. We've got to turn over every stone. We've got to change from prosecution to prevention." And then he said, "If you are not willing to carry out that responsibility, say so now and get up and walk out." He wasn't smiling. His heart was heavy. The order came directly from President Bush. The 9/11 attack brought out the best in Americans, from our next-door neighbors, first responders, elected officials, and law enforcement at all levels. 20 years later, I am still amazed, but not surprised, at the dedication of DEA employees. As the administration and the FAA talked about how to get our planes flying again, we knew we needed to enlarge our Air Marshal program, which had dwindled to just a few marshals. 4 or 5 days after the attack, I sent out a directive to DEA employees to ask for volunteers to work as a Sky Marshal. We needed 100. We got 400 volunteers. DEA employees lined up 1,000 deep. That's a powerful message and a forceful discouragement to our enemies. When America is called to stand against evil, we will line up on the front lines 1,000 deep.